Hello, Tremelle, and welcome to SOAR.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
I thank you. I'm happy to have you. And I'm really excited about our topic. We're going to be talking about from tragedy to triumph, finding your purpose. You have an amazing, very compelling story, and I'm so excited to share that story with so many of women out here who probably could use the encouragement and the experience that you have. But I usually like to just read a little bit of your bio to introduce you to my audience. So I'm going to just let the audience know a little bit about who you are. So Tremelle Howard Esquire is a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She grew up in the South Philadelphia community where faith, family, and friends were stressed during her early rearing at the New Central Baptist Church. During Tremelle's time in Maryland, she served as an editor for the Maryland Black Explosion newspaper, sang in the gospel choir, and pledged her commitment to Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. At present, she is a member of the Sigma Omega Omega chapter in Douglasville, Georgia, and has served as a two-term president, foundation president, membership chairman, and fundraising chairman, to name a few. Professionally, Tremelle is a licensed attorney in Georgia and Pennsylvania. Tremelle currently leads a federal legal team that is committed to protecting workers and retirees with offices in Atlanta and Nashville. Tremelle is the first African American woman to hold this role in the region and the only African American woman senior executive in her agency. And in June 2022, she became an author. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about that journey as we move forward. So, Tremelle, I always like to start off with asking this question. I can read your bio, but nobody can tell your story the way you can. So, what is your story? What has brought you to the place that you are at right now?
Sure. Well, thank you for that warm welcome and introduction. Um, I would say that, of course, I'm just like anybody else. Just a woman. I was married back in 2012 and had one daughter. Her name is Michaela Courtney, and was just living a normal, regular life. Going to church, going to work, and doing the things that you do with a 4-year-old. Which is getting into anything that they want to get into, and you're their little best friend because they're your only child. Um, and, unfortunately, back in June of 2012, uh, Michaela passed away as a result of a pool drowning. And that really, it just changed my life. And from that point of losing Michaela and going on that journey of just grief and healing, um, I really didn't know what to do, but I had faith and I had my family and my friends. And I know some would say, you have your sorority in your bio, but it was my sorority sisters who really held me up, living out of state, not being near my family. They were just amazing. And it may not be a sorority, but it could just be a good group of girlfriends. But just having those friends that will stand in a gap for your family was a tremendous blessing to me and my family, because that allowed them to be able to breathe a little easy, because I was in Georgia and they were in Philadelphia. And so, um, 10 years later, I decided that I wanted to establish a foundation and write a book. And so I started on the task of both projects about a year and a half ago. And I just knew I wanted to do that. And so I launched the Michaela Cares Foundation, which is dedicated to swim education and support, and simply just supporting children going to college, because that's just something I wanted to do to honor my daughter's life. And then I wrote a book about my journey, about the faith, family, friends, work, just how having all those things in my life is really how I'm sitting here today talking to you and really being in my right mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that, but for the grace of God, it could look a lot different. You could look a lot different. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and just being so open and transparent and willing to share your story, because sometimes we're it's easy for us to talk about the wins and the triumphs, but it's a lot harder for us to talk about the losses and the pain. So, but it's very important. It's very important to talk about it all. Um,
Absolutely.
and as a parent, I think that, losing a child, I know, is one of my greatest fears. And for a lot of parents, I think it's one of our greatest fears. And when we think about the possibility, we really don't know how we would get past that or beyond that. Um, Initially, how did you deal with the pain and the loss?
Initially, a lot of prayer. Um, I went to counseling, and so
Hmm.
my primary care physician referred me to a counselor, and so I went to counseling for a period of time. I even had some medicine that would help me get to sleep because in the beginning it was hard to go to sleep because you're thinking about your loved one all the time. And her bedroom was just outside my bedroom door. And, you got to walk by it every day, go to the grocery store, see some of her friends. Growing up as a child, I never understood why people gave money to people when they experienced a loss or they wanted to bring them food to the house. And then I realized because they didn't want you really to go back into that your normal way of life because it would trigger, memories of your loved ones. And so I really appreciate that support that we had because, there were times when we could just order food or get food prepared and not have to, be in your local Publix or Kroger and, run into people who really deeply cared about you, but they really didn't know what to say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people don't know what to say. And I can't even imagine how hard that must be, having to go to those places, and then also having to have those awkward interactions when you're not in a position to to comfort them, and they don't really know how to be comforting to you. So prayer, and it sounds like this support of your community was really instrumental for you. um,
And one
and
other
that
thing, if I can, I'm sorry if I
Mhm.
could just work was a really big part of my healing as well. And I like to share that because I know sometimes some people don't return to work because for them they can't do that part of the routine. But for me, it helped give me a routine that I could predict, but it also allowed me to be able to focus on something else. So that was
Yeah,
really a blessing for me. It may
yeah,
not be for everyone else, but I was out of work for maybe 8, 9 weeks, and then I went back to work, and that really helped me. I mean, the office was very supportive, but it also just gave me an opportunity just to focus on something else so that I wouldn't be down the entire day. It was a great escape.
yeah. That makes total sense. Having something else that you can produce and be productive and just be thinking about something else. Um, Now, community is one of those things that when I didn't read all of it, but when I read your bio, I mean, you are involved in lots of different community activities, and community seems to really be your jam, participating in community. Um, and you dedicate so much of your life to service. Why? So, just tell me, why is community so important to you?
Sure. Well, I'm a daughter of a social worker. So my mom is a my sister's a social worker, and um, that was like my first exposure to serving outside of the church. is that my mother, she was a community organizer. She worked in the community. She provided support to mothers and women when they were returning to work. She led programs that helped women who were moving from welfare to work. I saw a lot of service and giving as a child, and it came naturally to me. And so through college, being involved in the sorority and being exposed to Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which service is what we do. And um, it's a fulfilling part of your life, being able to give, and not in a way of I'm better than, but of doing your part. As Martin Luther King would say, service, what is the rent, right, that we pay, and just giving back, doing those things and being able to give to others, because I think you said earlier, but for the grace of God, there go I. And um, I'm not from the community that I live in, but this is my community. This is where I live, and I want to do what I can to make it better for those who live here who may not have everything that they need right at this very moment. But if I can do something in organizations that I'm associated with, if we can do something to support them, I want to be able to do that.
Mhm. That's wonderful. So you got it. Honestly, you got it. Your mother, your sister, a
Yeah.
family of social workers and people involved in the community, as well as your church. Um, and I wanted to talk a little bit about faith, because the way that we got introduced was through Dion Brown, who I interviewed her. Well, I mean, we've known each other for years, and we were in actually a small group together of women of faith. And she just wrote a book on her experience with faith, which is very different than most people's. And I would love to hear your perspective on faith and what role it plays in your life.
Sure. I grew up in the church. Probably, I think I started going to church around 5 or 6 and was baptized, I think, around 6 years old. And we started going to Sunday school. And then I kept saying, I want to go upstairs. What's going on up there? And I soon joined the church. I was very curious. And I was just all in, it was easy for me to believe, like they say, of child's faith, it was just easy. And as a young person, my childhood pastor, he was young, idealistic, had gone to Morehouse College and had been called to my church. And he was just amazing with the youth. And I mean, he took us out on sick visits. We went to his house with he and his wife, and we had all kinds of parties. It was just lots of fun. He just was doing everything that he could to like kind of protect us, keep us, out of the streets, and anything that he thought might be a distraction. And then I grew up in the church and went off to college. And just like everyone, when they go off to college, it gets a little, you're not going as often. But my connection was, let me get in this gospel choir. I can at least hear some Jesus, and you twice a month or whatever, if I didn't get out to service. And I've had a really good experience with the faith community. I won't say that it's always been everything's always gone right, but they've always been a big part of my life. When my daughter passed away, the churches that I had been connected to, and at the time I was married, and my ex-husband, he's a minister, and so the churches he was connected to, everybody just showed up.
Mm,
My church that we were members of before we had moved to Atlanta, um, Pastor Waller and Sister Waller, they were on like an anniversary trip when Michaela passed, and they cut
mhm,
they cut that trip short to get back home, to see about us. And they were there, and the church was there. We had just joined a new church in Atlanta, like literally had only been there about maybe 6 or 8 weeks. So I felt like, oh my gosh, we're traumatizing these people. We just got here, and then it was this thing, like, their baby passed away, but they were so loving. Zion Hill and Elizabeth Baptist Church, and and then New Birth Baptist Church out of Miami, Bishop Curry. He was just amazing.
Mm,
I was in Atlanta or in Douglasville, when everything happened, and my family was in Philadelphia, my husband and my daughter were in Florida, and Bishop Curry just he bankrolled like getting my family to Florida. It was just
mm.
like call the travel agent and just get it done. And they just got it done. It was like no questions asked and just doing things, for you. And so that was just one way of how the, various churches were just showing up and being there and being supportive. And sometimes people, they'll say, well, it was because, oh, he was a preacher. But I was very involved in church before I got married. And, sometimes it happens and it's a positive and sometimes it isn't. But for me, it was. And it was like God showing up in human form. And then my family and my friends, my best friend, she lives in Florida. Like we took over her house, and we could still laugh even in the pain. I remember when we were down there for about a week, and everybody had flown from different places. We had some family that were staying in hotels and staying at other folks' house. And when we left, just my immediate family, because it was such a rush, I mean, like nobody was coordinated. We had our suitcases and things like that. We kept laughing at ourselves, saying, "It's just like Mr. Brown's family." We were on our way to the airport because it was just like, what is this luggage we have? We could laugh at that, but they were just the Joneses. They were just very, very loving and supportive. And I mean, it's what you hope would happen, you know,
Mhm,
um, when you have something like that happen. But it wasn't. It didn't stop
mhm,
at the cemetery. They kept showing up. They kept calling. Sometimes they would come down and visit and stay a couple of days. Folks allowing us to stay at their summer homes, things like that, just to kind of help us get some peace and tranquility. And so it's not easy, but for me, my faith experience has, overall, I would say with, you take the good with the
mhm,
bad, but um, I'm blessed and glad that I was introduced to Christ at a young age because I do think it matters. Um, but it's so funny because I haven't finished Dion's book, but I have read it and I enjoy, I hear her voice as you're reading it. And some
oh,
of it,
yeah.
like, it's so familiar. And it's like you can see her personality because she's a little feisty. And, so I was a little, what they said, be like, okay, ask many questions. And so, you can see that. But, having been in the church and seeing women sometimes not validated and elevated, despite us being more than the majority of the
Mhm,
membership in the censuses, or at least when we were growing up. Um, it was women and then some men, and it was never 50-50, but I mean, they really, ran the church, and it was kind of how you grew up that way, and like, oh, women aren't, supposed to be in the pulpit and things like that. And
right.
slowly, some of those things changed in my childhood church, but it took a while.
Yeah,
It wasn't just like, oh, Stephanie has answered the call. They were like, she going to preach from the floor, right?
right,
Those the
right.
things. Um, but yeah, I wasn't that activist feminist to know that like, well, this is a problem. I just was like, okay, just let me. I just kept saying, this is interesting. Just because you didn't have a lot of women preachers that you were that you had experience with. I'm glad that's changed.
I'm glad it's changing too. And I'm so glad that your faith experience was loving and welcoming and compassionate, and I think that's the way most of us imagine that we want our faith experience to be, and how we want people to show up for us. And, you know, just like anything, there's always going to be those negatives, but we probably hear more negative stuff about the church and the body of faith than we do positive. So it's really good to be able to hear your story and have the other side of it, because I think, most of the time it is positive. I know my church experiences have been like that as well. And one of the things you said was really interesting, because it's almost like a master class in how to support people when they're going through a loss. Because I know one of the things that people have told me when they go through a loss is that everyone's there in the beginning and everyone is concerned. But in that beginning phase, you may not need people as much as you do down the road. Um, and it sounds like the people in your life showed up for you in the beginning and down the road. And so that's a good reminder for all of us, whether we're in the position of need or whether we're in the position to give comfort to someone in need.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I learned is you can't ask hurting people what do they need
Yeah.
because we're not equipped to tell you what we need. Um, Even if we may know, but that's not going to happen. You really do have to elbow your way in there a little. And um, I mean, some of my sorority sisters I hadn't known for a very long time because I'd only been in that chapter for uh, just 2 years, and it just kept showing up. And they would say, "Oh, so and so is downstairs." I'm like, "Who?" I go look at my director and see who this is. I'm like, "I'm coming down," just sit there like, "Yeah, we here. I don't come down here. Let me see you. Let me lay my eyes on you." It's the Southern
Right.
hospitality. It was, but they really just showed up like, "Hey, do you need help sending out those thank yous? I'm coming over. I done picked up some stamps." They're doing the things that they knew you needed done. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes we don't know how to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some people know how to do it better than others, depending on their experiences. But sometimes, most times, you really do need to just say, "Hey, did you plan to cook Thursday? I'm going to send some food on Thursday. Eh,
Yeah.
Do you have any allergies or things you like?" And then just do it rather than, "I could cook for you if you want to." Nobody wants to
Right.
put you out. And so that's that proactive way of really being there and showing up.
Mm. I love that. I love that, because just like you said, depending on people's experiences, they may not have ever seen that modeled or know how to do that, but you're telling us what to do. So that is super, super helpful. So thank you for that. Um, and I wanted to say congratulations on writing your book, because you said that Michaela passed in 2012 and you just wrote your book in June of 2022, right? So okay, so it was 10 years. So I would love to hear about your journey to writing the book. How did you know that that's what you were supposed to do, and how did that come about? And first tell us the title and everything as well.
Sir, the title is still standing: Blessings, Burdens, and Brighter Days After the Loss of a Child. And so maybe 3 years in, I knew I wanted to share my story, but I had no
Mhm.
idea of how I wanted to do it. Like at first, I was like, "Oh, I'm just going to share all these funny stories about Michaela," because we had all these funny stories. Sometimes you'd sit around and you'd laugh about those, but that kind of fell to the wayside. And then it kind of, you get busy, you're not really thinking of it. But probably in year 8, I started really thinking seriously about, I said I wanted to write this book. I feel like this is, I'm being led to do this, but I wasn't sure of what to do. And I started, I mean, I like to write. So I just started writing and jotting down just streams of thought about ways in which I um, could write the story. And I wasn't comfortable yet of whether or not I was going to share parts of me. right?
Mhm.
And so that was I was a little nervous about that. And the oddest thing is I saw a movie that I'd never heard of that Will Smith was in, Collateral Beauty,
Mhm.
and it's actually about a family. The guy, he had lost his daughter, and he was like a big time executive, and he was just like lost after his daughter had passed. And his partners was trying to help him get out of that. They needed him because the business was going down. They needed his mind back, and they started writing him letters, um, like from heaven, like so he felt like it was God or was the daughter talking to him, which he was like making him feel like very hopeful. He was excited. But I got this idea from that. I was like, oh, go, maybe I can do something about sort of some letters of thank you, because there were so many people who had just
Mm.
shown up. And I talk about that in the book. And that's why I sort of take time to even talk about, you hear so many bad things about the church. I wanted to show people, the church does show up. And multiple churches showed up. And three three of those, like in very big ways, they were churches that we were no longer members. We were no longer giving to them every week. This wasn't about a transactional thing. This was about love. And
Yeah.
and so I started an outline where I was planning to write this book of thank yous to groups of different like groups and individuals, and I had put them all in different categories as to the thank you, and I started writing that. But I didn't have enough for a book. And then I talked to a friend who had written a book, and she teamed me up with someone and who kind of really coached me to get my story out, to say, no, you got something here. You can tell the story. But I was running away from telling the story because in
Yeah.
telling the story, I had to tell more about me, and I just didn't want to do that part. So that's how I kind of got to, okay, this is going to be a memoir, but it's really going to be about Michaela. But I'll start it off about me growing up and being exposed to faith, and how that exposure at a young age and staying connected to God, it was
Mhm.
preparing me. It was preparing
Mm.
me for June 2012, because as a child, um, I was an usher, traditional Baptist church. We had the usher board. We marched in. Uh, we were very active. The children were very active. I've gone to so many funerals, more than I can count, right? Because that's the kind of community it was. So and so died, you're going, and you're going to usher. So I've gone to many funerals, none of which I was sitting on the first row. Always I'm there. You're serving, and so to be in a place where now I was experiencing that, I was prepared to deal with that in a
Yeah.
way that I could not have imagined, because
Mhm.
it's like, okay, this is going to be hard. It hurts, but I know everyone has to pass this way. Not children, this is a reverse of nature. Parents
Mm.
are supposed to bury their children, not the other way around. But that upbringing really, it prepared me, and I wanted to be able to share that with other people, that you can get through this, and whatever your story is, just know my grief is higher than yours. But if we can, at some point in that piece of that grief, use some just logic and analytical ability, you can then step back and say, oh no, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And if
Absolutely.
this maybe you lost a husband, a wife, okay, you know this she lost a child, you start thinking, I can do this, and you can
Mhm.
do it at your own pace. And I
Mm.
think, that was the blessing, is that I was able to do it at my own pace, but at the same time, I had so many people just rallying behind me, um, wanting me to be better and get better. But my faith in God really just it
Mhm.
just it was just there. And as much as I felt like I was in a fog, it just sometimes seemed unreal. I talk about in the book, once when I I go to visit a friend, you know, this was a family that we hung out with a lot, and they had a very large family, and all the families would get together. And I decided, oh, I'm going to go over to Cheryl's, and I go over, and this house is where Michaela had, she had been babysat that first 18 months of her life before we put her into daycare. And I go over, and everything seems fine. And then I'm going down to the basement. I don't know if it was what kind of day it was, Easter something, but it was where family, everyone was gathered. And when I got to the bottom of the step, it was like an emotion came over me that I can't describe. But it was like the senses, the noise, everything. Like I just broke down, and I hadn't had a moment like that in, I don't know, probably like 12, I'm thinking, oh, I'm doing good. And it just was a reminder that, it can hit you at
Mm-hmm.
any moment. But it's okay when it does, because you're going to be okay. And that's one thing I would encourage folks is, we're in the holidays, and one of
Yeah.
the things I took from my counselor was just you've got to have a plan. What's your plan for Christmas or Ramadan? What is your plan? What is your plan? There's a Hanukkah, whatever's coming up, you need to have a plan. You might not execute that plan, but having that plan, it just makes life much better when you get to that holiday and that seat is empty. And maybe it's you're going to go on a vacation. You're going to honor their memory by going to the cemetery if that's something that you need to do, or going to do their favorite thing. But having that plan is just it's very helpful. And it was a major blessing to get one of those, the tips that you put in your tool belt that
Yeah.
do that for not just the holiday, but for her birthday, for the day of her transition. I try to figure out what am I going to do. And my friends are always calling, okay, what's going on? What's your plan? What's your plan for June 16th? What's your plan for July 10th? That's her birthday. Just trying to make sure that you don't get caught off guard. And it may
Yeah.
turn out that you just don't want to leave the house, but at least you had a plan.
Yeah.
It makes it more bearable.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I'm just reminded that actually a friend of mine, her son, she lost her son about a year and a half ago, and today's his birthday. And she was sharing about, uh, how she was feeling. And as you were talking about just how your faith kind of prepared you, she's in a different place in terms of her faith. I don't she's never really been a person of faith since I've known her. And I know she has her own timeline, and I try to check in with her and support her. But the pain, like she will just burst into tears every day, several times a day, even over the past year. And then most recently, she's had some, I think she separated from her husband. And I know that that's not uncommon, that marriages can struggle also when you lose a child. So, what you just said gives me another way to reach out to her and just remind her and ask her about, well, what is your plan for the birthday? What is your plan for the anniversary? What is your plan for Christmas? And just, also I'm going to get her your book. but yeah.
Yeah, it's hard because this is a lonely road. And for all the good intentions of those who have information to share or experiences, depending on, who it is, some can't receive the
Hmm.
encouragement because they're not ready to receive the encouragement. I could, just when I'm in my moment of sort of being sort of selfish and it's just all about Tremelle, I could say to someone, well, if your child lived to 16, well, my baby didn't even get to 5, didn't get to first grade. Like you have way more memories. You have way more birthdays and pictures and things like that. But that's not how it works. You know, Michaela was here for 4 years, almost 5. Someone else, their child made 16, 20, whatever it is. Um, it's hard no matter how many years that child lived, right? Because we all had hopes that they would live even longer, and we had
Mhm.
dreams for them. And I just would encourage, you know, those who do not, maybe don't have a faith relationship, think about maybe someone in your family that does, maybe that grandmother. They're always usually, they have been in our community good examples of, seeing God move in their life. And it may not be that God moved in their life to help them move past losing a child, but maybe it was God helped them raise 13 kids with their
Mhm.
husband with little education, and all 13 of those kids graduated from high school and went on to college. Those are miracles that we kind of ignore because it's
Mhm.
just like, oh no, well they did that, yeah, they did that, but they own their own home. They had, look to see where you can gain some strength from. And I don't try to push Christianity on anyone, but I will say I'm grateful that I had God in my life, and that for me, I could look back and look at other things He had done in my life that were blessings. And so I, maybe for a moment, because you're like, what did I do
Mhm.
to cause this, to deserve this? But I quickly got off of that train, and just realized that, okay, I mean, this is not what I would have planned, but this is where I am. And started just thinking back on all the experiences Michaela had had. And so it was like, ah, I mean, she lived a good life. I mean, she got
Mhm.
on a plane and she wasn't 1 years old. I didn't get a plane till I was 17. I just started making those comparisons. Like she was way ahead of me. She may have only done 4 years. I mean, she went to Disney World when she was 4. I didn't go to Disney World till I was 20 something. Like you start making those kinds of analogies, like, okay, well, she still got to experience some things that it took me a longer time to experience. And I would just say, day at a time. Take a day at a time. Be kind to yourself. You don't have to have it all together. And then talk about your loved one. That really has helped me. I
Mhm.
I I talk about Michaela. So if you're going to be in my life, at some point I'm going to say, "Hey, Michaela used to do such and such," and it might make you uncomfortable in the beginning because maybe you have 3 kids and they're all just doing great things, and then you feel uncomfortable. But I always make people feel comfortable because I want to hear about your life, and I don't want to live a life where people can't share what's going on in their life, especially with children. That's, we know that God hasn't given up. We got more children coming, and Michaela was short, but it was still impactful. And I'm still getting to talk about her and keep her legacy alive even today, 10 years later.
Mhm. That is beautiful. Um, just your strength is just amazing. And you just said that you're still getting to keep Michaela's memory alive. And I know that there are some things that you do to honor her memory. And I think you have a foundation set up for her. So
Yes.
tell me a little bit about that.
So, um, Michaela, she passed as a result of a pool drowning. And so, in the beginning, right after she passed, I wasn't ready to really kind of face that. And we started a foundation, but it was really more of an endowment through my sorority, through our
Mm,
sorority. And so we have an endowment through the Educational Advancement Foundation where students who live in the North and Southeast United States can apply for scholarships if you are studying, I think it's art, um, religion, and mathematics, because that's kind of seemed like we didn't know really what she was interested in, but those kind of things she kind of leaned towards. Um,
Mhm.
so we did that because that was like it was something we could do, but we didn't have to manage it. I wasn't
Yeah.
ready to manage anything. It was like,
Mhm.
someone else will do that, someone else will collect the money, all of those things. And so we give out scholarships periodically through that. But for the 10th anniversary, I established the Michaela Cares Foundation, and it is dedicated to ensuring that we increase the numbers of swimmability
Mm.
in children, especially Black children. The numbers are not good. That Black children, Black people, we do not know how to swim, and then when we sometimes learn how to swim later than our white or even Latina counterparts, and so just want to be able to bless families. And so we're focusing on the Atlanta metro area, Philadelphia, and Miami, where we will be giving out what I call swim kits, which is the vest, a swim cap if that's what you need, goggles, and other sort of swim protection items this spring. And I'm really excited about that. And we'll also be providing financial support to families. So to the extent that you want to go to swim lessons and you can't afford it, we want to be able to stand in a gap so that you can pay for those lessons. And so we're really excited about that. You can find out more about the foundation by going to michaelacaresfoundation.org, and all the information is there.
That is wonderful. I know one of the other organizations I'm in, Jack and Jill, we have a Jack and Jill Swims as well, because just like you said, the statistics are terrible in terms of our children knowing how to swim. So with the foundation you just mentioned, is that one of the ones that, so some people have certain charities that they can give to through their job that they can kind of United one is always one that you can, but can you give to that one? Like, can you have that be like your recurring charity?
You can go on to georgiagives.org, and Michaela Cares is set up there where you can give and you can make it a recurring gift. You can also, if you go to the website, to Michaela Cares website, you can, if you click on PayPal to give, I think there's an option for recurring giving. I'm not sure if we're on the list yet for United Way, but it is on the to-do list to check.
Okay. Well, that's great that it's on Georgia Care. So all my Georgia people out there, you can go uh,
Georgia
and
Gives. Yes, and we participated just this week last week in Giving Tuesday. And
okay.
so that was awesome. That was our first time participating. So it went well for our first time.
Good, good. That's wonderful. Um, you do all of these amazing things. You've got the foundation, you've got your community work, you've got your faith work, and you have a job too. You got like you work.
I work work. Yes, I
You
work
work
work. I'm
work.
blessed. Yes, yes.
And one of the things that I noticed in your bio is that you do work in the DEIA field. And so first, and that you received an award, that you got a 2021 Community Service Award from Share House of Douglasville for your DEIA work. So congratulations on your award. And I have heard of DEI, but I've never heard of DEIA. So what does the A stand for? And tell me more about that work that you do.
Sure. So the DEIA, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So the sort of accessibility of, maybe we hire an employee who needs some tools in order to be able to do the job, being able to provide that support to a new worker, an existing worker, so that they can be on the same level playing field. And I actually received that DEIA award from my job. And so, as a part of that, we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And I'm over the training for our agency. And so I am always searching and interviewing companies to talk about what kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings they provide. And
Mhm.
um, and then we vet them to see if they might be something that is good for a federal agency. We it's just so important, just on a diversity standpoint, to just have a diverse group of people, right? Because different minds just help to make for better workplaces, community groups. It's just churches, whatever it is. You don't want all of the same person and thinking the same way. And but we're also focused on equity and ensuring that we're treating people um, and giving them the same. I don't want to say the same, but making sure that we are providing opportunities for individuals, especially for groups that may be underserved or underrepresented
Mhm.
in the United States, or in my field of work. And so it's and then inclusion, having people at the table. So once you get the diversity, then they need to be at the table in order to really have that impact. So if you just say, "Oh, I got this diverse group," and then but the leadership is not diverse,
Right.
then there's no inclusion for them to be at the table to really impact where the organization is going. And so um, that is a labor of love uh, that I do at work, one part of my job, but it flows over into the community work, because it is applicable in ensuring that you have diverse groups and diverse committees. And then my work with Share House is I've been on the Share House board for probably as long as Michaela has been gone, because I had actually um, just been selected to be on that board, and then she passed away. And so they just have a special place in my heart. So I've kind of stayed. It's kind of sentimental, but um, Share House provides support for domestic violence survivors. And we have a house that that provides shelter for the women and children, um, and um, and then provides that kind of pathway to get out of the shelter to get into transitional homes. And it's been a blessing
Mhm.
these last 10 years.
Yeah. Oh, you are not ceasing to amaze me with all of the ways that you give and serve. So it's really a blessing to just get to hear about the ways that you're giving and serving and blessing other people. So as we wrap up, I always ask, on this show, SOAR, Sisters Overcoming and Rising. And one of the things that we overcome is any limiting beliefs, anything that we believe that's no longer serving us or that's standing in the way of where we're destined to go. So, in all of the things that you've done, your career, overcoming your loss, writing your book, what are some of the limiting beliefs that you had to overcome in order to be where you are today?
Oh, that's a very good question. Um, I think one of the limiting beliefs um, is that I'm enough.
Mhm.
And you don't get there overnight to recognize that you're enough. um, but also um, being in the people pleasing business.
Mm.
And so
Hmm.
I'm the baby. And so I think it's just, maybe it comes with the territory. You want everything to be right. You don't want people to get in trouble. You don't want this. You don't want that. So you're always trying to like make it right, and you want everybody to like you. And um, I am a social person, so I want harmony. But
Hmm.
over these last couple of years, I've grown to the point that everyone is not going to like you, and everyone may not be on your team, but it's not the end of the world.
Mhm.
And, with the loss of Michaela, I realized that I'm stronger than I ever thought that I was. And so, um, you know, in another interview, I was talking and I shared the devil took his hardest punch, and I'm still standing. And and that's what I would say to anyone who's experienced a traumatic loss. Um, you're still here. You may feel like crap, but you're still here. And you may not turn to the Bible to look for your strength, but look to just someone you might admire who's overcome and who's been
Mhm.
around. Most of our grandparents um, who had 13 and 14 children, when you hear their stories, they usually all suffered miscarriages, and they weren't like some of the ones we hear now. They were usually the ones where they had to birth the child, and the child was stillbirth, and they kept going, and they still made these loving homes for us. And I think there's so much community and so much strength in being vulnerable and
Mm.
sharing what one has gone through and assuming positive intent that you don't know what people are going through, and taking the time to just stop and listen to people, and then even to share your story, because those some of the folks who may be thinking, I haven't made any progress. You've made progress, you just don't know it. You're not acknowledging it, but you made progress. If you've gone back to work, that was progress. If you've started exercising again, that was progress. Um, or if you've stopped having one or too many cocktails, right, to medicate how you're feeling, because we've all been there. That's progress to say, no, I don't need that. That's not what I want. I
Mhm.
want to do something. I want to do something else.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, you hit a lot of spots there for me. Definitely the people pleasing and wanting to be liked, and um not feeling like I'm enough. I know a lot of uh very high achieving black women that are in my circle or that I'm around often have those same limiting beliefs that we have to overcome. And I think that just being in community with one another and hearing each other's stories helps us to overcome that, because we see someone who looks, just like us, who has overcome it, and we know that we can too. Uh, so this is my final question. Um, the title was, triumph over tragedy, and then the second part was finding your purpose. Um, do you feel like you found more of your purpose or a different purpose um, in your triumph over tragedy?
I do. So I've always been led towards faith. And so I feel like with, the passing of Michaela, from day one, I was sort of ministering to folks and encouraging them and talking about the love of God for those who knew, and even those who hadn't been to church, whenever they was like, well, you go. Why should I go if this has happened? And having to really sort of be
Mm.
an advocate, for my faith, to say, this too shall pass. And um I think that I've found parts of my purpose is to be encouraging and to use the pain that I've experienced as a witness that, what God did for me, he will do for you. And that, the old folks would say he's no respecter of a person. Um,
Mhm.
and I tell people all the time, right? So I was going to church all the time. When Michaela had her accident, I was at church. So I
Mm,
don't try to sugarcoat it. I was somewhere where you say, well, you were doing what you were supposed to be doing, right? Okay. And she still had a fatal accident at a pool. And so it's not about, I got to do this, I got to do that. It's about a relationship. And so I'm hoping that this, that my purpose through sort of sharing my story and how God has blessed and being able to bless other families to be able to afford swim lessons and
mm.
helping them, go to college. I mean, I may not be sending Michaela off to college, but I want to be able to help send someone else's child off to college. And I'm excited about this. What I feel like is a new chapter in my life, and I don't know that I thought that this is what it would be, but this is where it is, and I'm very excited about the possibilities.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And I have your website scrolling at the bottom. So if you would like to get a copy of Tremelle's book, Still Standing: Blessings, Burdens, and Brighter Days After the Loss of a Child, or information on speaking engagements, or book signings, you can go to her website, www.tremelle.com. And I just so glad that we got a chance to spend this time together. Uh,
Absolutely.
just having this conversation with you has truly encouraged me and just warmed my heart and my spirit. It almost just feels like a hug. And so I'm so glad that we got a chance to do this. So thank you.
Now, thank you for having me. This has been it's been nice. I pray that someone was encouraged.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Until next time, thank you all for